Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Audio bandwidth for Security Now is provided by Winamp for Android, the ultimate media player for your desktop and Android device, featuring wireless sync. Download it free at winamp.com/Android. Video bandwidth for Security Now is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com. This is Security Now, episode 281, for Christmas week 2010, The Portable Dog Killer. Security Now is brought to you by Ford and voice-activated sync, featuring true hands-free calling, turn-by-turn directions, 911 assist, and more. Available exclusively on Ford, Lincoln, and Mercury vehicles. And by MailRoute. Businesses of every size use MailRoute. One user or 50,000 users, it doesn't matter. MailRoute will protect you from spam and viruses, simplify your life, and make your email usable again. For more information and 10% off for the life of your account, visit mailroute.info. Hello there, how are you? I am dressed a little bit oddly for Security Now, I know, and that's because this is a special edition of Security Now, our holiday edition. This is a big red letter day. We've done Security Now, we're in our 6th year now, hundreds of episodes. Steve has never missed a week. Through rain, through snow, through sleet, through hail, through vacations, through Canada trips, no matter what, we've always done a new episode. And I finally convinced Steve to take the holidays off, to relax a little. And I think one of the reasons I was able to do that is because he really wanted to repeat this episode. Clearly one of the most beloved episodes of Security Now. Security Now covers security issues, security news, explains how technology works. But this was a real departure. This was a story from Steve's childhood that really in many ways may end up being kind of our Twit Christmas story. There's no Christmas in it, but it's just such a wonderful story with such a wonderful ending and moral as well. You know the episode as The Portable Dog Killer. If you haven't heard it before, gather the kids around and we'll listen to this together. We are going to cut off the beginning part, you know, the tech news and all of that stuff, because it's not germane. It was several months ago. But I think you will enjoy this. Without further ado, Steve Gibson, the man at grc.com, the host of Security Now, and a story from his youth, how he got started in this hacking business, the portable dog killer. We join the show already in progress. Yeah, I'm ready for the story of the dog that ate the laser, or whatever that is.
Okay, well, so it's 1971, and I'm 16 years old, a sophomore in high school. And we had a real problem with a dog in the neighborhood. I don't know if this dog was clinically rabid or what its problem was, but it was about 2 blocks away from where I lived, and the people who owned this dog had sort of an RV trailer or something parked in the backyard, and a fence which went right up to the sidewalk, which contained not only this RV but this unbelievably vicious dog. And the fence had a gate where sort of this driveway was right onto the road, but this was not like their main garage entrance. And the fence, the 2 wings of this gate were pinned just at the bottom, so that it was sort of flapping open if there was any pressure on it. So what would happen was, for I don't even know how long this was going on, but I mean it was a serious problem. People walking by the sidewalk would virtually be attacked by this amazingly vicious dog. I'm a dog person. I grew up with dogs. I love dogs. I actually, at the time of this going on, I had a redhead cocker spaniel, and so this dog was just unbelievable. It would scare the bejesus out of people because they'd be walking on the sidewalk and this thing would hear them and come galloping through the backyard and lunge at the top of this gate, which looked like it was about to spring open. And I mean, and the dog, I think it was a German Shepherd. I can't quite remember the breed now, but I mean, it was big. And I mean, the owners, I don't know what could have been in their mind. They must have known this was a problem. They must have been getting complaints from people. But, you know, times were different then. You know, dogs were not on leashes. Kids were not on leashes. I mean, you know, dogs roamed the streets. You know, times were, as I said, this was 39 years ago. But finally one day, as I was coming around my block, there was this elderly lady, and this all happened in San Mateo up in Northern California, which is where I was in junior high and high school. And this dog scared this elderly lady so much that she tripped and fell off the sidewalk into the street. I mean, it was that big a problem. It was just unbelievable. And so I thought, okay, I need to take matters into my own hands. This dog needs some training. That is not okay to rush people and lunge at the gate and look like it's about to jump over the gate. And the gate looks itself like it's about to give way because it was only pinned at the bottom and wasn't closed at the top. So I thought, in order to train this aberrant canine, I need to do something that will shock it. Something, give it an experience that is negative, which is completely outside of its normal, you know, daily experience. So I thought, I need some sort of a loud sonic weapon. So,
oh, Steve, I can see where this is going.
Oh, this has unforeseen consequences, which is part of the moral of this story.
The case of the aberrant canine.
So, my parents were divorced at the time, and my father and his wife living up in the city in San Francisco. So my sister and I would jump on the train Friday afternoons and take it up to San Francisco, and then the trolleys over to the marina on the other side of the city where Dad and his wife were. And then Saturday mornings was sort of free-for-all time. Basically, it was kids, get out of the house, go play. You know, I mean, as I said, times were different 40 years ago. And one of my favorite areas in the city was Mission Street. It was a couple blocks out of the city from Market. That's one of the main, you know, like Market Street's the main drag. And back then, Mission Street was lined with war surplus stores. And of course,
I think it still is, actually.
Is it still?
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of Army surplus stores down there.
Okay,
yeah.
And so, you know, I was hacking when I was 5. In fact, you know, on my resume page, there's a picture of me that Dad took before I was 5 years old in the backyard building something with, you know, wiring circuits and things. I mean, I just had this drive from forever. So for me, I could spend hours in these war surplus stores. I mean, you know, radar sets, you know, dynamometers, it was like nirvana for me. But this particular weekend, I was on a mission because I had to build some sort of a sonic beam weapon in order to deal with this dog. So,
was there no parental supervision at all?
Not at all.
None
no,
at all.
They'd given up.
Yeah,
I'd beat them senseless. They knew I was a good kid. They knew I was not gonna, you know, get them into any real trouble.
Right.
I mean, you know, the Boy Scouts of America might disagree with that, but that's a story for a different time.
I mean, most parents, if they heard the phrase sonic weapon, military surplus store, and dog, might exhibit some concern.
Yeah, mom just said, okay, you know,
Whatever,
I don't know what you're doing. Just, you know, don't kill yourself. So I found the pieces I needed. I don't know if it was over 1 week or several visits, but I found this amazing, like grip from like maybe a helicopter trigger handle or something. But I mean, it was a gun grip with a switch in it, which was like, okay, perfect. And I needed a transducer, some sort of a high frequency, high power transducer, and rummaging around in these bins with my sister sort of in tow. She's 2 years younger than me, so she was 14 and just sort of, following Big Brother around. I found some sort of a piezo, it was in like a black steel casing, a piezoelectric crystal with a pointed silver dome. And I said, oh, that looks like the right kind of thing. So, and none of this cost anything. It was 50 cents for this, $2 for something else. And so I got those things. I also found just a perfect photo flash parabolic reflector whose at the widest part, it was probably about maybe 10 inches in diameter.
It's very Tom Swift here.
Oh, this is what happened. And so then I needed a body for it. And in San Mateo, down on 42nd Avenue, was like a real electronics store, not like a Radio Shack that was just kind of cheesy. This was 42nd Avenue Electronics. And so I found a steel little mini box I think it was like 2 inches by 2 inches by 6 to be the body of the gun. And then set about building this sonic weapon. There was a chip at the time called the 555, the NE555. I think Signetics innovated this thing. It was this incredibly versatile oscillator.
What year was this?
1971.
Oh, this is very early in terms of microprocessors, yeah.
Oh, we didn't have those. No. I mean, and my first job it might have been this same year or the year after. This is where I encountered the PDP-8 for the first time. So I built an oscillator, and I wanted the frequency to be. I mean, I understood that dogs have very sensitive hearing, and they're able to hear outside of the range that we can. Like the classic dog whistle, where we blow it and the dogs perk up. We sort of hear maybe like air blowing, or maybe we can get a sense of something. But on the other hand, I didn't want it to be supersonic because I wanted to know if it was working. So I wanted to be able to hear it too. So I pitched it somewhere like around 15 kilohertz as my guess, way high, but still audible to us. And I had I remember that I had power settings. Remember that at this time, Star Trek was happening. And so, of course, they had phasers. And so I was obviously modeling this on something sort of that I'd seen in science fiction. So I remember a knob on the back it had 4 positions off, just so, you wouldn't hit the trigger by mistake. And then 3 power settings. And I had 3 different colored dots that I got at the stationery store, a green dot, a yellow dot, and a red dot. And this thing had 3 9-volt transistor radio batteries in it. So the green dot gave it 9 volts on the output stage. The yellow dot was 18 volts, and the red dot was 27 volts. All 3 batteries ganged in series. And so I assembled the oscillator, built the power amplifier stage that was transformer coupled to this piezoelectric transducer, and it worked. Then I built this thing together, mounted the pistol grip on the bottom of the box, this perfect photo flash parabolic mirror on the front, and then positioned the transducer in the focus of the parabolic mirror so that it would work. And the machine was finished. Now, back then I was 16. I called this the portable dog killer.
Not worried too much about SEO, I guess.
Well, exactly.
Or police.
And I mean,
or the
again,
ASPCA.
It wasn't that I wanted to kill this dog, certainly not. But the dog would have killed anybody who walking by if it could get loose. I mean, this thing was out of control. So the name was more inspired by the fact that the dog was the killer than that this was going to do any killing. I just wanted to teach the pooch that it's not safe any longer to go lunging at passersby. I mean, literally, the fence was at the edge of the sidewalk. And I mean, this was a hazard to public health. And frankly, I was probably saving the dog's life, or I hoped to, by training it not to do this, because sooner or later something horrible was going to happen, and the dog would be put down. So I mean, that dog would be destroyed. So this thing, oh my God, it really worked. Two things I remember about it vividly is I was surprised by how quiet it was off axis. That is, it really did, this parabolic mirror really did focus the beam of sound that it produced, so that it didn't hurt you at all to like be behind it, to be the shooter, or even to the side. But boy, when you aim this at yourself, it made the weirdest sensation. I think it was
You felt it. You didn't hear it, but you felt it.
Well, there was like this, yes. No, you also heard it. I mean, it was pitched down low enough that it was really loud, but something about the phasing of it with your ears, it made this weird sort of like bone crunching feeling in the middle of your head.
Oh, dear.
It was just strange. Anyway, I thought, well, this ought to do the trick.
I hope you're enjoying the story of the portable dog killer. I know I am. It's really worth hearing again and again. We'll get right back to it in a moment, but I do want to thank our friends at Ford for sponsoring Security Now and all of our shows on Twit. Ford has been such a blessing to us, and we've had such a great relationship. This was the year we went out to see Ford and the Ford plant in Dearborn, Michigan. We saw the incredible Rouge plant that Henry Ford built 100 years ago to make Model Ts. We saw the new green roof, the eco roof that they have on many of their plants out there, and got to take a ride on the test track. I got to crash a Flex into a Fiesta. I'm not going to live that down for a while. And had a lot of fun. And the Maker Faire was out there, too. So Ford really has been a great partner. And I expect we're going to be going back to Dearborn and doing more things with Ford very soon. I'll tell you one thing I know I'm going to be doing with Ford soon is going to Madrid. I'll tell you about that. You could be going, too, in just a second. But before I do, I'd like to talk a little bit about my favorite subject, the Ford Sync. You know, you've heard me talk about Sync so many times. It's in my Mustang. It's in many Ford, Lincoln, and Mercury vehicles, and it is just a fantastic way to keep, your connections to the outside world and yet still pay attention to what you're doing, which is driving a car. You keep your hands on the wheel at all times, your eyes on the road at all times, but you can listen to music, you can play back text messages on some phones, you can make calls, you could change the climate, you can ask for movie times and gas prices, get turn-by-turn directions, 911 assist, and more. It really is like Kit, that smart car from Knight Rider. You're talking to your car, and it's responding to you. Ford Sync works so well. I want you to try it. And the best way to do that is to go to a Ford, Lincoln, or Mercury dealer and say, I want to test drive the Ford Sync. You got some great vehicles to choose from. You can get the Sync in the Ford Edge, the Focus, the Fiesta, the Fusion. There's some really nice vehicles, but whatever you do, make sure the Sync is in it when you test drive it, so you can play with that too. It's funny, they love showing off the Sync. Every time I go over there, they say, can we show you the Sync? And most dealerships will have one guy who's like the Sync expert. Get him to show you all the ropes, because there's a lot to it. The great Ford Sync. You can find out more at syncmyridepodcast.com. Now, let's talk a little bit about Madrid. So you probably know about the Ford Focus. This is their new global vehicle. For the first time ever, Ford's going to have one model available worldwide. They've really taken the state-of-the-art in auto design, in technology, and put it in one vehicle, the new 2012 Focus. I've seen it. I've sat in it. I have not driven it. It is mind-blowing with these great engines Ford's using, this super state-of-the-art technology. Of course, not only Sync, but the higher-end My Ford Touch with a big 8-inch screen in the center console, the two screens behind the steering wheel. I mean, I could go on and on. This Focus is something. And you could be test driving it in Madrid. They're going to take some viewers, some listeners to Twit, and take them to Madrid, give you a chance to be one of the first ever to test drive the Ford Focus. I'll be there too. It should be a lot of fun. You can get this all expense paid for you and a friend, and $10,000 for the charity of your choice. But you got to do it before the end of the year. So before December 31st, 2010, go to twitfordfocus.com. It's a Facebook page. Instructions are there. You need to make a 2-minute video on why you should go to Madrid, what your charity of choice is. twitfordfocus.com. Do this right now. Don't put it off, because I want to see you in Madrid. We're going to drive the Ford Focus together. And yeah, if you drive with me, we'll make sure you have a crash helmet, because, well, you heard what happened in Dearborn. All right, let's get back to Steve Gibson and the Portable Dog Killer, Part 2.
So I, snuck up to the gate the first time and did, here, doggy, or something to the effect. And I heard, grump, 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 rah, and as it always did. And I blasted it in the face, point blank.
Ooh.
Now, the dog made
Now,
a
it's
sound.
not lethal. We should emphasize.
It's not lethal. No, and the dog was never hurt. Nothing. I mean, it wouldn't hurt ants. It might make them go around in circles, but
Right.
it wouldn't hurt them. The dog's legs collapsed. I mean, they fell out. It fell to the ground and then ran as fast as it possibly could away. So I thought, okay, round one. And an hour later, I came back and nudged the fence a little bit, and I heard grump, 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 rah, and I blasted it again. And this went on for a couple hours.
Oh, jeez.
And then I remember...
We are not recommending this, and we will not... This may not be your first blog post is the plans for this device.
No. So...
I don't want the ASPCA calling me.
Well, like I said, this ended up working out well for the dog. I really believe.
Oh, no.
Because a few hours later, I went up to the fence, and the dog didn't attack. And I will never forget, carefully, because, I mean, this thing was really... This would have taken your head off. Peeking over the fence, and there was the dog. I could see its nose and one eye peering fearfully around the corner of the house.
There's something over there. I don't know what it is.
So I was delighted with this, and I think it took about 3 days before the first shot of the day wouldn't, the dog was realizing, okay, this is just not something I'm going to be able to continue doing. This had been its favorite thing, attacking people for who knows, I mean, for months or years. I mean, it was sort of a known problem in the neighborhood. And it was finally when I saw a block away, this poor elderly lady literally blown off the sidewalk.
Oh, dear.
I said, okay,
Yeah.
This is not okay.
Yeah.
So that was done. Now, my buddies at school had sort of been aware of the project. I was telling them what I was doing.
Steve, you must have been such a cool kid. This is so cool.
So they wanted to see this.
Sure they did.
So I figured, okay, it's show and tell day. So I brought the portable dog killer to high school. Before first period, the gang had gotten together. We had what we called the MRC gang, which was the Math Resource Center. In other words, this is
Nerds.
the geek. This is the
Geeks.
the nerd group of the high school, a Math Resource Center group.
Oh, boy.
And I don't remember which one of us it was, but we had a real problem in the school. And I need to explain a little bit about the structure of the school, the layout, because this comes into play here in a little bit. Aragon High School in San Mateo was in the form of like a huge square donut. So it was hollow in the middle, and there was an Olympic-sized swimming pool and some other concrete sort of on a lower level. And then sloping up from the lower level up to the normal class level was this huge green lawn with some trees. And, we called it the quad because it was a quadrangle. And then in the inner perimeter was sort of sidewalk, and against the wall were all of the student lockers. So it was this, large square structure. One single structure was the entire high school, with then classes all around the outer perimeter. And sort of going down in spoked halls from this center quad. Well, we had a problem with seagulls. We're not far from the ocean. I don't really know where the seagulls came from, but they were constantly circling around, and no doubt looking for potato chips or unguarded sandwiches or scraps of food that students would leave behind. And of course, unfortunately, they create a big mess just with their own droppings. Someone, and I don't remember now who, shot a seagull with the portable dog killer.
I want to emphasize at this point, for those just tuning in, the name dog killer is
Euphemistic.
it doesn't kill. It's a sonic blast that is harmless.
Yes, it's
but annoying.
Yes, well, what it did was it nearly knocked the seagulls out of the sky. Now, we're 16 years old.
Oh, dear.
Pong won't be invented for another year.
Oh, no.
Until 1972.
Oh, no.
We had no video games. Until now, we didn't have any kind of a beam weapon. We saw it on Star Trek, of course. Now we had one, and it shot birds. Now, it didn't kill them, but it definitely surprised them. And this was the best thing that had ever happened to us. Because it was like, something was reacting to this.
Sure.
It was fantastic.
The non-lethal bird stunner.
Yes, it was fantastic. And so Aragon High School was performing an experiment in the district. This was the second year of what was called flexible scheduling, more like college scheduling. Instead of all students being in classes periods 1 through 7, we had blocks of free time scattered throughout the day, different times and different days of the week.
Santa Cruz High did that too when I was there at the same time. Yep.
And so what happened, very trendy, and we loved it. What happened was that meant that various of us in the gang had free time in different slots. So then it became a matter of handing the gun from one to the other. And basically, we would, in small groups that were free during that period, lay on the grass for having target practice.
Oh, man.
Shooting seagulls, which was just fantastic. Each seagull reacted a little differently, but there was definitely a reaction. I mean, you knew when you got a shot off. And so that's the way we spent the day. It was just, we were having the time of our life. So at this time, I was creating curriculum for the third year of electronics. The high school had electronics 1 and 2, which was the first 2 semesters of the first year, which taught basic electrical theory using tubes, unfortunately. And the professor, Harold Farron, was a neat guy, old, gnarly ex-Navy guy, and tubes was what he knew. For him, transistors was a big deal. He wasn't quite sure about them. That was electronics 3 and 4 in the second year of electronics. And, of course, I felt like I died and gone to heaven to actually be in school taking electronics. I mean, here, I already knew electronics. I force-fed myself this stuff.
Yeah.
Years before. But now I was actually getting credit for it and had a lot of enthusiasm for it. And at one point, I said to him, I guess in my second year, that year, my sophomore year, I said, Mr. Farron, why, what about digital electronics? Why, it's nice that we learned about tubes last year and transistors are good, but the future is digital. And he said, well, I don't know digital. And I said, well, it's really not that hard. And he said, well, why don't you teach it?
Wow.
And so during my sophomore year, I created an entire curriculum for third year electronics, which we created there. And I heard years later that it had gone district wide and was being taught throughout the whole San Mateo Union High School district.
That's so neat.
So the point of this is that after school, I would go into the electronics lab and work on this stuff. And I had free reign. I'd come to the attention of the administration very early on. I think it might have been the incident with the shock machine. I'm not quite sure what
the first shock machine.
Oh yeah, well that's another story. But Mr. Farron knew that he could trust me, and he would leave the doors locked, and my requirement was just, I was trusted, just to make sure that I'd pull the door behind me. So this afternoon of the sonic beam weapon, I was probably leaving around 4:30. And so the school was completely deserted, nobody there. I mean, literally, completely empty. The whole quad was empty. I went to my locker, got the books that I needed, got the portable dog killer out of the locker, where I had stowed it at the end of 7th period. And to this day, I don't know what I was thinking.
Oh, no.
Because I saw on the far other side of the quad, Mr. Archibald, the assistant principal.
Mm-hmm.
And so
No.
there was good cover where I was.
No.
We had these big concrete containers for the garbage and big cement planters. And so I crouched down behind one of these cement garbage can containers and shot Mr. Archibald with the portable dog killer.
Oh, dear.
Now, I mean, it was a long way away, he was, and I was hidden. What completely jarred me was his reaction. You would think that, a regular person being shot at great distance by a sonic beam weapon would be a little confused. They'd look around, kind of like look up maybe. It's like, what is going on? Not Mr. Archibald.
Gibson!
He couldn't see me. So, I mean, I was hidden. I was undercover.
Yeah.
He spun around. And that's what took my breath away. It's like, oh, my God, I didn't expect a reaction like that at all. And he stood there motionless, trying to take in the entire scape of this huge high school quad. And he was motionless, and he was looking for like anything. And so I'm thinking, oh my God. So, I'm probably starting to shake at this point, but I kept my cover, and he stood there slowly looking from side to side. And then, he appeared to give up, and he turned back around and continued walking in the direction he had been before.
Now, I've gotten word that a child is using his imagination, and I've come to put a stop to it.
Principal Skinner, on his way.
So I stood up and started to get the heck out of the quad. But I kept one eye on him, of course, because he was the danger.
Oh, yeah.
Well, he faked me out.
Oh.
He spun around again and saw me and pointed at me.
I saw that.
Pointed at me and then beckoned with his other hand.
Oh, dear.
So
he's smart. How do you know?
Oh, this is, I
guess you were well known by now.
Yeah, I was. And so we met about halfway in front of the office wing. And I was doing everything I could with my body language to have this gun be as inconspicuous as possible.
What did it had this parabolic thing.
Oh, it wasn't inconspicuous at all.
Yeah.
I mean, it was clearly
like
a gun.
A ray gun.
It was a ray gun. So that's the way that's the way I designed it. With a power control knob on the back with, green, yellow, and red, and a big reflector out the front. So it was dangling at my side as inconspicuously as possible. So we approached, and he looked at me and he said, "Stephen," and I said, "Hello, Mr. Archibald." And he looks down at it and then back at me and said, "What is that?"
Oh boy.
And I said, "Well, it's a sonic beam gun." I wasn't going to use its real name. And he said, "I see.
I see.
And did you just shoot me with it?" And I said, "Yes, sir, I did."
Well, you're very honest, Steve. That's good.
Oh yeah, and I mean, yeah. There wasn't much choice of answer.
No, I didn't shoot you. No, sir. No,
At this point. And so he said, "And where did you get that?" And I said, I built it.
Alien
He said,
technology.
"You designed it?"
Wow.
I said, "Yes." And he said, "Why?" So I gave an abbreviated version of the dog story about training this dog to not attack people any longer that were walking by on the sidewalk. And he said, "And was that successful?" I said, it was. And he said, and you brought it to school this morning. I said, uh-huh. And he said, and were you shooting it all day long? And I said, well, it turns out that it also shoots seagulls. And it pretty much knocks them out of the sky. And he said, I see. And so I said, you know, my friends and I, he said, the MRC gang. I said, oh, you know about that? He says, I know everything.
Yeah.
And I said, well, yeah, we were sort of handing it, you know, around during our various free periods for target practice. And he said, and I said, you know, I didn't seem to be a problem. He said, oh, we'll be talking about problems in a minute. And he said, we began getting phone calls in the morning.
Oh, dear.
From teachers all over the school.
Oh, dear.
Who were reporting high-frequency sounds. They didn't know what was wrong. They thought maybe the heater system had gone on the blink. And I said, oh.
Ooh.
And he said, so we called the district engineers.
Oh, boy.
And they came out, and they heard these sounds, too. We heard them in the office wing as well. Everyone was hearing them. And they thought maybe it was the ultrasonic alarm system that protects the school had gone on the fritz. And, of course, we couldn't close down the school with an alarm system that wasn't functional because there'd be all kinds of consequences for that. So they worked on the alarm system, trying to figure out if it had gone wonky somehow.
All right, we're going to wrap up Steve's story, the portable dog killer. And I want you to hear the end because Steve really talks about, I don't want to say the moral, but I guess it is the moral of the story, the real message of the story. And I think it's one we all can learn from. But we will get to that in just a little bit. Before we go any further, I want to just remind you about my friend Tom Johnson. I met Tom at family camp in 2004, and a great guy. Tom spent a lot of time in his cabin that summer, and I wasn't really sure what he was doing. So I said, "What's up?" He said, "I'm a programmer and I'm writing software." I said, "Well, Tom, tell me about it. I'm really interested." And he said, "Well, I found a way to fight spam. I've got a new product that I think is the best anti-spam program I've ever done." Now, Tom's pretty well known in the industry as a designer of FrontBridge. Microsoft bought the program from him. They call it Microsoft Hosted Exchange Services. I mean, this guy knows stuff. He worked with John Postel at USC. He's an internet pioneer, and he found a way to clobber spam. Well, I was a little skeptical. Back in 2004, I was spam-ridden on my server, so I said, well, I'd like to try it, and he set me up. I've been using MailRoute, his product, ever since. 6 years now. Tom tells me over 6 million spam messages clobbered in that time. Over the last 12 months, I got 970,000 spam messages, 30,000 good messages. I never saw a one of those spam messages. I didn't have to because MailRoute got them even before they hit my server. It saves traffic to your inbox, saves you time, heartache. I tell you, MailRoute is amazing. Now, most of you as individuals probably have anti-spam solutions, whether it's Gmail or Hotmail or Yahoo Mail, maybe from your ISP. But if you run a server, you know you need some anti-spam solution. This is a great choice. Big or small business, many universities use it. I've been using it for years, and I can vouch for it. 10% off for the life of your account. Accounts start as low as $2 per user, and they go down the more users you have. And I think there's a $20 minimum, although Tom's waiving that for people who want to just try it for themselves as well. So you can find out all about this at mailroute.info, mailroute.info, and that's the site to use for Twit listeners because you get 10% off if you sign up from that site. So a tip of the hat to Tom Johnson, who's done a great job fighting spam and has kept me spam-free since 2004. Now, the final segment and the moral of the Portable Dog Killer episode with Steve Gibson.
So Now we know what it was.
Yeah.
It was you and your sonic beam weapon. He said, I guess I'm glad you shot me because the mystery is solved. He said, now, I want you to take that home.
Oh.
And I don't want to ever see it or hear it again.
I'm amazed he did not confiscate it.
He did not. Well, he knew me. I mean, you know,
You were a good kid.
I was a good kid. I'm sure that, you know, I'm sure that the office knew I had permission even to stay in the electronics lab after hours and all that. Because, I mean, Farron was very much by the book, being ex-Navy. He was not liked by most students who thought he was way too rigid. I just thought he was great. So I took the gun home, put it on the shelf. My friends and I were all very disappointed. They were all anticipating many more days of target practice. Although, to be fair, I have to say that by the end of the day, there really weren't so many seagulls any longer circling around overhead.
Trained them too, I guess.
Well, I think they decided this is not where we want to be.
No.
So that's the story of the portable dog killer.
Steve, what a great story.
And when I was thinking about this, I was thinking about all the email that I've received during the podcast from young listeners who wonder, you know, how to get going, how to get started, what would I recommend? How do they differentiate themselves? And the second employee at Gibson Research Corporation, one of the most brilliant engineer programmers I've ever known, a guy named Steve Rank, went on to found a couple gaming companies. He has one now called Specular Entertainment. His first one was Swingin' Apes, which he sold to Blizzard. And what stood out in my mind about Steve actually is really that, like me, he was building things from the beginning. Nothing could stop him from building things. He was, involved. He, I mean, I heard about all the projects that he had built, much as I had as a kid.
It's a good sign, isn't it?
Well, that's my point, yes, is clearly there were incredible unintended consequences from my creating this gun to train this incredibly vicious, ferocious dog. But that's what happens when you build things. Nothing happens if you're sitting behind a screen shooting aliens in a video game. Doesn't happen. All the discoveries that have been made by people experimenting.
Do something.
Tesla was building all kinds of things, and it's you can't know what you're going to learn until you're confronted by it. You've got problems. Something happens you don't expect. I mean, it's amazing how opportunity rich the environment is. But if you're not in it, you're not going to get the opportunity. And so what I would encourage people to do, I mean, Steve and I are still good friends, and we get together every so often, and we sort of reminisce about the projects that we built and think to each other, can you imagine being a 10-year-old now?
What opportunities.
With all the stuff there is? I mean, there's these things, programmable gate arrays, which are just amazingly powerful, where you can use software to program logic softly in this. I mean, I don't know what I would. I mean, there just isn't enough hours in the day as it is for me. But if I were a 10-year-old or 12-year-old or 15-year-old, I would say turn off the video game. That's doing nothing. Build something. Build anything. I mean, the feedback you get, the fun, but mostly the discovery. You will end up discovering things that you cannot predict. You cannot know about. That's the nature of it. But I just think that's something that our pasteurized world has sort of lost a little bit of. I mean, this sounds like a wild story. I guess it was probably a little wild in 1971, but probably not as wild as it sounds today.
Today, the Department of Homeland Security would be coming to your door.
Exactly. Yeah. So,
but
anyway,
it's a very good, I even have in a very small way a similar story. And it did start for me with video games. I got an Atari 2600, but what the game did is made me think, oh, I want to know how this works. And it doesn't have to be a physical thing you're building. It's easy to build software.
Oh, yes. In fact, that's where I've switched to.
Yeah.
Yes.
And everybody has an opportunity now for free. There's so many great choices. There's alice.org, a great way to start littler kids on object-oriented programming. And there's so many things out there. And I think there has to be that little seed in your brain, which you obviously have, Steve obviously has, where you get inspired to say, I want to make something. So I think there will always be people doing that.
I think maybe it's a matter of empowerment. I mean, now I will say that my dad did encourage me. I mean, one of the things that I did when I was 5, we would go down to the docks in Oakland and buy a hunk of electronic gear coming off of the naval ships down there. And they hung it on a fish hook, a big, huge fish hook, and you paid for it by the pound. And the car looked like like its suspension had gone broke in the back because this thing was in the trunk. And we'd bring it home, and he'd sit in the middle of the garage, and he'd say, okay, go at it. I mean, there was nothing I wanted to do more than tear that thing apart. And he says that he knew that, I was internalizing the work of the country's best engineers as I was taking this apart. And he thought that someday I would start putting things back together again. And, it turned out that was sort of the path I took. But so there has to be, I think, some encouragement. But as you said, also some spark. And, nothing could stop me from this kind of inquiry. And so I would just encourage people to get involved, to do something. I mean, something proactive, something creative, not just passive, because passive, nothing's going to happen that way.
I think that it's probably the case that there are people who just don't have that spark, and they're going to, look, we need people to flip burgers. And those people, not everyone's going to be a maker. But boy, if you see that spark in a kid, just encourage it. Don't discourage it. Yeah. It's a great lesson. And you know what? Thank goodness that Vice Principal Archibald, he didn't beat you up over this. He sensed that this was something that was appropriate for you to do. He made sure you didn't do it at the school.
Yes, and he understood it was completely unforeseen. There was no way I could know.
Right.
Or that. Oh, I forgot to tell you one thing. He said as I was leaving with the with the gun and breathing a big sigh of relief. He said, "Oh, there's one thing, Steve." I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Next time something appears to go wrong with the high school, we're going to track you down first."
We're calling you. I think that's wise.
Just because, I mean, he went through so much trouble. I mean, bringing engineers out from the district, crawling around to figure out what had gone wrong with the heaters and then with the ultrasonic alarms. I mean, I don't like to think about the expense that they went through, but he realized had they just said, "Steve, are you doing anything strange today?"
What are you up to there, Mr. G?
I think that's just a wonderful story. And I would have to ask, I don't suppose you still have the portable dog killer?
I have a lot of my paraphernalia. I did do helium neon laser guns later in life, and I have some of those, but I don't know what happened to this. I went to Berkeley and then moved to Southern California, and at one point I actually had a lab upstairs in San Mateo. That's where this was built, was in Steve's, I'd be in the lab, as they put it, when I was called for dinner, which is where I built this. So, and it was just sort of an extra room that I commandeered. I said, okay, this is mine. This is my space. I need a lab. So at one point there was a purging of all the stuff I'd left behind.
Yeah, of course.
And I think that happened. I mean, I can see it clearly in my mind. And of course, many people were witness to all this craziness. My life was a series of wacky adventures like that. We'll share one every so often.
I love that spirit. And we celebrate that spirit today with the maker. Make Magazine, the Maker Fairs, and there is this notion of making, which is focused, I think, on physical making, which is a great thing. But it's fine to make with software. In fact, more than ever, we need software, and that's perfectly appropriate. And I think kids should learn. Costs nothing. You don't get your hands dirty, and most of the time, the principal doesn't confiscate your program.
And frankly, when people have asked me, and I've said this before on this show, how do I learn this language? How do I learn this, or how do I learn that? My answer is solve a problem with it.
Yes.
That is, you just can't sit there. I mean, reading a book about a
Abstract
language
is
is dry.
Yeah.
So come up with something you want to do and make yourself do it in that language. I mean, there's no hurry. There's no deadline. It doesn't have to be tomorrow. Just start. And when you start, the rest will flow.
Such a great moral. I hope anybody listening to this show is probably in that category of a maker and doer. And I mean, you wouldn't be listening to this show if you didn't have that spark. But it's good for us to remember. Spread it around. Let others get involved. We're going to. I want to sponsor at my kids' high school a first team, the robotics competition this fall, because that's an example of it's an institute. Its truth is it's better if the kid goes off and does it on his own and gets in trouble like you did, but. Failing that, at least if there's some sort of institutional encouragement to do that and some opportunity to do that, that's a good get you started.
Well, and it does fit today's world more than building, sonic beam weapons.
Yes.
Fits today's world.
Yes.
So.
Oh, I love that story. The portable dog. I have we just got to play this every Christmas. It's going to be the Christmas episode of Security Now. I hope you listen to Security Now or watch it. We do the show live every Wednesday, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern at live.twit.tv. And, of course, you can always watch after the fact. It's on iTunes. It's everywhere podcasts are. It is I have to say, it's our geekiest show. If you want real hardcore tech info, nobody does it better than Steve. We've got tech updates, security updates, patch news, news about the security world. And, of course, almost every episode we either answer questions from viewers or Steve will explain a complex security topic. In fact, I really think many of these shows are evergreens. If you go back through the catalog, and you'll find it all at twit.tv/SN, you can listen to this and really become an expert, not just on security, but on computing in general. I'm just very proud of this show. And Steve does such a great job. Security Now. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, all of you for watching us this past year, and we look forward to a great 2011 together. We know there'll be plenty of security to talk about. So have a happy New Year, a Merry Christmas if you celebrate, and we'll see you next year right here on. Good night.
Security Now.